Hey, Koala here. So I'm going to do a type of video that's unique. So we're going to do an account review for Warlord, OTA season of I think this is considered fall of 2025. So for Warlord fall 2025, we're going to do an account review, and I'm going. But first, I'm going to talk about the meta of the RTA season before I go absolutely crazy with the heroes. So everyone here is up to speed with how the RTA season was. So the OTA season, first and foremost, it started about late August, early September. So this season went about for like four months, 3 months. So it's a pretty long OTA season, like it's average. And when it came to the OTA season, this OTA season started when Scales already came out. So Lady Scales is already out. So as a result, the easiest way we can split this up is probably within like say by half, right? So we had the moment when Lady Scales was out, which is the first half, and then we have all the buffs right after. So once like halfway through the season, we had the Furion collab, and we had all the buffs with Maid Chloe and I forget who else, but like pretty much Maid Chloe, the Maid Chloe buffs. So as a result, the first part we're going to talk about is it's Lady Scales. So when Lady Scales came out, before Lady Scales came out during the preseason, we had a lot of issues, or at least a lot of the solo players had a lot of issues regarding like getting ran over by turn 1. So if you were like a turn 2 player, you kind of just get ran over by like Ahmed. There's nothing you can really do because Ahmed at that point has her EE. So Ahmed EE is a 10 speed, is a speed EE, and it gives, and usually the people put on her is the S3 EE, which includes gives gap. So if you pair gap with crit damage buff, you basically could S2 S3 give swift attack to some really powerful nuker like Straze, and then or like in the future we'll talk about Furion, but like Straze right now, and use that to basically one shot one of your teammates. So that became a problem pretty much because Ahmed like Pastrade was so prevalent. There's almost no way to counter it. If you just didn't have enough HP, or you just didn't, there's nothing you can do about it. It's really hard to tank down because Strade just did so much damage with crit damage buff and gab. He probably did about 60 to 80k. There's no RESing that. You cannot RES that, and you can't even you can't really out heal that. You can't really out heal that because typically people who play like that, they also have a follow-up on top of the strategy. So they play so even if you play someone like Warlord who did have an E with the revive E and all that stuff, it didn't matter because your opponent had another way to just kill your Warlord. Your Warlord's probably dead. So the S3 S2 did so much damage, it probably killed your whole team, and then they have a follow-up to make sure that Warlord dies right after that. So it kind of sucks, but that was the way of it. So when Lady Scales came out, she was naturally overpowered. So Lady Scales came out, and then another character came out after that, which was Genesis Ross. So we'll talk about Lady Scales. So Lady Scales, when she came out, she was pretty overpowered. Or people already knew she was overpowered. What Lady Scales provided, she provided 70% damage, 70% sharing effect to all allies except for the person in the front. So the person in the front will take that 70%. So think of it as basically RES. So RES you basically give a 70% RES to the person in front. So that person in front will take a buttload of damage, but everybody else takes massively reduced damage. So that's pretty much what it was. And then on top of that, Lady Scales is pretty much an Ahmed counter because of this very specific thing. She gains 50% CO push equal to the amount of CO push done by the enemy, which is basically always meant that since Ahmed S2 gives like a 20% CO push to everybody, Ahmed only CO push herself or her frontline, the only main target, by 20%, but she actually total push by 80%. So that means Lady Scales push by 40%. So you can see with all of this, she basically the Ahmed counter, and she is the exact counter to aggro, because she basically made it impossible to basically one-shot your team. The only way to one-shot her is have any character that can straight up remove damage share at all. But since damage share, since any removal of damage share isn't really popular, or not really popular, but it isn't really common in a lot of aggro characters, this basically became a problem for people. They couldn't just mindlessly pick armored Strade all the time, because armored Strade can't win here. Because for Strade S3 specifically, in order to get that S3 S2 combo off, you need to kill. But since this also provides immortality for the person on front, Strade would never kill. And then as a result, it basically allowed you as a turn 2 player to kind of survive at least for one turn before your person on front kind of dies. The S3 is pretty cool. It gives an abundance, which is basically another form of which is basically the same buff that a toy gives. That thing. It's basically it. It can't be stripped though. That's the only thing. But it just does 2 extra damage after attacking. And it ticks down every turn, so it's not like it gets consumed every time you use it. Actually, it lasts for 2 turns, so it's basically a better version of the buff, and it lasts for as long as you have the buff, and it's unstrippable, so it's a unique effect. So the thing I should mention here is that compared to all the other characters, Lady Scales doesn't actually buff. So instead of buffing, she actually puts all unique effects, which pretty much means all the characters in the game who like rely on like needing a buff or something to work, it doesn't work because she doesn't have a buff. She has unique effects, except for maybe the immortality. That's for sure. And on top of that, she also had the spell all debuff. So the spell all debuff just is really clutch. It's really good against characters like Meluna. So Meluna can't just S3 anymore. So basically it removes another aggro counter. So another way aggro could probably try to deal with you is to S3 Soulburn with Meluna and then seal everybody and then wait it out. That kind of doesn't really work with Lady Scales because she has a cleanse all. So a full cleanse, which basically allows her to kind of like cleanse off all like the debilitating debuffs. And because of how her stat line is, since she's a Soul with Taurus, she has high effect resistance. So she can probably resist a lot of the debuffs and then cleanse your team, basically preventing a lot of the control aspect. And of course, the S1 is just really annoying. It has a chance to apply fear to the enemy for 1 turn, and then recovers HP, the target's max HP. So this is so for this ability specifically, what's really important is the target's max HP. So this heals more depending on if the target's really tanky. It heals less when the target is not tanky. So, and then fear as a debuff. We know fear is very annoying because fear is basically just an ONG stun. We see it on someone like Mort, but it's not as big of a deal because on someone like Mort can ignore effect resistance and put it down. Lady Scales can't. Lady Scales have to still go through the effect resistance and hope that she can get it. Although the Soulburn 100% chance it does an AoE version of this, it's pretty good, and it's usually pretty good at stopping a lot of the cleave. So the idea too is that you play against like an armored Strade, and the Strade doesn't have I don't know. Well, Strade is not a good example. You have like armored with some form of like DPS that doesn't have immunity at the start of battle. Right, you can add armor S2, S3, Lady Scales will outpush because how much CO got thrown out, and then you S1 that person with a chance that you hope that they won't break out of the fear. In that case, as a result of that, you actually manage to basically shut down their aggro. But most of the time, you rather just S3 because the thing about the S3 is that it gives you the 25% CO push, and then the 70% damage share is enough to usually prevent your opponent from actually doing anything to you. So it's more likely than not, getting this off is more important because it just means that you can start cycling a lot faster than your opponent. So, and otherwise, yeah, Lady Scales is pretty cool. When we look at the Lady Scales build, we'll talk about it after in the build section, and then so she is meta defining. She became the reason why a lot of aggro people can't just pick aggro all the time. You can pick aggro, you just can't do it like straight out. You can't just ban Balian, Balian and Horsetti. So Balian Seti, and just run it in. Because if you try to ban Balian Seti, you're opening yourself up to Lady Scales, to Barunka. You're being too obvious. So that's why I never thought that ban really worked in this meta. Okay, the second hero I'm going to talk about, and I should mention, these are the only 2 Moonlight 5s that came out this patch. All the other Moonlight 5s, all the other banners for Moonlight 5s are all reruns. So only Genesis Ross and and Lady of Scales was the only Moonlight 5 that actually came out during this entire RTA season, which basically made it a lot easier to play. Because there's no like meta-defining next Moonlight 5 right after the first Moonlight 5. And she came out early this season, so people learned how to deal with it. So for Genesis Ross, is this free 5-star you get. So he's a free Moonlight 5. You get it by doing your Genesis Ross quest that is down in the bottom right corner. I don't have it because I finished it, but you get it by doing that, and after you complete the epilogue chapter. Genesis Ross is what I would define in the meta as your pick Moonlight 5. What I mean by pick Moonlight 5 is that he's really good at picking somebody off. That's his entire thing. He's a pick character or he's a finisher. Where for finisher cases where like there's like 2 people on the field, he's a finisher. But when it comes to like all 4 people on the field, or all 4 enemies on the field, he's a pick class. He's a pick DPS. So he's basically like falls in line kind of like with like Warlord, right? So Warlord's kind of like this pick character. She's really good at picking somebody off because she's on single target. Genesis Ross is opposite. He's AoE, but he's really good at picking somebody off because of his S2 and S3 combo. That's pretty much it. So when it comes to Genesis Ross, how was he in the meta? So Genesis Ross in the meta was in the beginning for the meta, people thought he was going to be overpowered because for how he works, right? Genesis Ross S2 and S2 are the most important part of his kit. His S2 seals and then collapses, where the collapse basically reduces the HP by 50%, which is basically because it's doubled against heroes. It's 50% pretty much. It's not going to ever be 25% because most people use them for PvP, not really for PvE. For PvE, you can use them for certain hunts and stuff, but no, most of the time, people are immune to collapse. So people use them for PvP. So that's 50% HP reduction, and then you seal, right? And then on top of that, since people play him as a defense like Wargun, he will crit. So since he crits, he gains himself an extra turn. So the first part, he reduces their HP by 50% and then seals them, and then his S3 full pens them, and it deals damage. It damage increases with few enemies, and then grants him some Sacred Covenant. So Sacred Covenant is basically just a undispellable revive. So as long as he has this buff for 5 turns, he will revive at 100% HP as long as he's dead. And then he's also immune to all debuffs and all 4 effects like Warlord. So basically, what this is about. So his S3 out of a good Genesis Ross S3 out of 4 people does about 15,000 damage. So around 14 to 15,000 damage, or maybe like at minimum 12k. So 12 to 15,000 depends on Orius or not. But let's say 15,000, right? So the S2 combo, S2 will reduce their HP by 50%, and then S2 instantly wipes them out. So basically, that's what I mean by pick class. He's really good at picking somebody off because most characters in the game don't have 30,000 base HP minimum, right? There's only a few characters who do, and Genesis Ross kind of just blows anybody else who doesn't. So he can instantly pick off somebody as long as your character isn't like a Dragon Knight Xenia, or your character isn't boss on a proof of battle set. Other than that, like he's not one-shotting anyone. So yeah. His S1's not that good. His S1's just 25% CO push. That's it. And it increases damage proportion because he's a HP scaler. So how was Genesis Ross in the meta? He's pretty decent if your opponent's trying to play control. Right? Or your opponent is really relying on just one character to kind of survive. You can S2, S3 combo. So your opponent plays like a lot of like Muluna, Depth Dealer Ray, right? So Muluna, Depth Dealer Ray can't do anything about Genesis Ross. He's immune to all debuffs. Since he's immune to all debuffs, he is actually immune to the Pestilence passive, he's immune to Seal, he's immune to getting unbuffable and all that stuff, so there's nothing to stop him. You can't stop him in the starting. The only way to stop him is to kill him. That's it. That's the only way to stop him. And killing him is really hard, as we'll mention in the future, because he is an HP scaler. And he came with his own auto attack, which increases max HP by 10%, and also gains 10 souls, so it can guarantee the soul burn for the ignore effect resistance. So the only way to really stop him is to put immunity, because as you mentioned, none of this part of his kit actually has strip. So if you had immunity, that's the only way to stop Genesis Ross from S2 you. Other than that, Genesis Ross will probably S2 and one-shot you. So it's just a matter of like time. And I should mention that Genesis Ross S3 scales pretty fast. So it scales, I would say, more like exponentially the less people you have. So at 4 people like alive, or 4 enemies, it seems pretty like bad, right? 15,000 not, it's okay, it's decent. But when you start reaching when you have 3 people, it starts reaching 20,000. At 2 people, it's like about 30, probably 40,000. Now one person is like 50, 60,000, like a Strada do. So the amount of damage you do is exponential. The more people that are gone, the more it's gonna hurt. So if you ever had a situation where this S2 actually did enough damage because you collapse first and then you seal collapse and then does damage. Oh, actually no, not that way. If you seal first and then you attack, yeah. So you seal in the collapse, and if you S2 and this S2 kills and you go down to 3v4 situation with Genesis Rod, this S2 would do a lot of damage because you one-shotted somebody. So this is like easy to one-shot someone like somebody like Spirit Isolene, somebody with like any form of damage, any form of damage, any form of like damage limit, because people don't build a lot of HP, or any form of like, or any character with like really low base HP, right? These characters will just get nuked instantly by Genesis Rod, so it's pretty funny to say. Okay, anyways. And that's for the first half. So the first half was pretty much dominated by laser scales. Like all it really was playing laser scales, or playing boss rank if you didn't get laser scales, something like that. In the second half of the meta, for sure, we're gonna be talking about is when we had the when we have Furin, right? So Furin's amazing. So when Furin came out, Furin is incredibly busted. She's so overpowered because her entire gimmick is that she has a undispellable defensive magic, which is basically, think of this the magic as a soul-consuming skill nullifier. As long as she had more than 4 souls, and as long as she has at least 4 souls, right? She would consume 4 souls and then immediately skill null that entire attack. So all of that basically means like you can't one-shot her at the big damage dealer. The only way to one-shot her is to do extra damage, to get rid of all her souls, or to do reflection damage, as we'll mention later. And then on top of that, she also has really high damage for, I'm not going to pronounce it. So her S3 has really high damage and penetrates the target defense by 50%. And then her S1 also grants herself immunity, so it basically means she can't really get controlled. Because all the main control in this game are literally based on like no strip control, but they do like fear and stuff. She's immune to this. She's immune to this because she has immunity on her S1. And then on top of that, she has AoE, so everything in her kit's AoE. So this is a massive damage AoE. This one, her S1 attack itself, it doesn't do much damage, but the extra damage does a ton. So the S1 probably does like no more like 6k. The S1 itself, right, that's no more than 6k, but this attack, this Vozenbo, someone's gonna kill me. This thing does a lot of damage. So she's more like the who you call like Hosetti. Well, Hosetti S1 doesn't do a lot of damage, but Hosetti's S1 extra attack does a lot. So it's more like that. So Furin was very powerful of a character because of this passive. Because she grants 40% increase resource increase, that's okay. That isn't really the main part of her kit. The main part of the kit is as long as she has 4 souls or more, she grants defensive magic. This basically made her the safest DPS in the game. Because no one can one-shot her. You can't one-shot her outright. You have to do extra damage, and extra damage can be quite quickly mitigated. Because you see later with the Maid Chloe buff. So Maid Chloe got a buff where she changed her passive from 20%, I think it was 20% effect resistance to all allies to 50% reduced extra damage, like FCC. So as a result, if you play like FCC and Furin, you're kind of immune to extra damage. So Furin kind of just lives forever. And but as you see adaptation came in, and then Furin kind of like being, and then as a result, like as I mentioned, Furin plus Armor became really powerful. Because since Furin's one of those characters who are immune to extra damage, nothing can stop her. So you can't really stop her with like right? So she's become like a Straze. But except for Furin, her S3 comes out first, right? And her S1 is guaranteed because her S3 gets a 50% CO first. So first attack gets another 50%. So she has 100% CO first, and then she will immediately S1 and probably obliterate your entire team, even through a character like Lady Scales. She'll do so much damage. And even then, after all of that, right, Furin isn't even useless still, because she still does a lot of damage. She's not like Strate, who's useless after dumping his S3, S2. Furin is still really powerful after she jumps to S3, S1, because she still will be able to S1 and continuously hammer down your front line. So with her S3, she will probably practice immortality. The S1 will probably bit of chip damage, and then once your immortality comes out, Fearing will S1 whoever your frontline is, instantly killing the Lady Scales team, and it basically got rid of Lady Scales' entire power. So yeah, Fearing was pretty powerful. And then the other honorable mentions that I don't own here actually is Sasuke. So a character like Sasuke is pretty good in this meta. So Sasuke is pretty good because Sasuke provides the 30% evasion for everybody, which basically made it as if you had it makes it what do you call it? It basically makes it RNG to hit somebody. That's pretty much all she did. So she's pretty annoying. And on top of that, her S3 also has straight up ignore dispel all bugs and ignores anyone with less HP to her. So that's pretty good. That basically meant that she's pretty slow. So she's a very slow counter character, obviously. But because of this, because of how this passive works, she is really powerful because she has this straight up decreased hit chance, which then feeds into a passive because she counters for every time an ally, except for the caster, evades, except for herself, right? And then she starts like doing her thing, and she basically kind of acts like a moon like Kayron because once she gains 10 fighting spirit, and once she has 100% fighting spirit, she consumes all her current HP, and then she immediately does a massive AoE hit like Kayron. So Kayron S3 does a massive damage. Sasuke does a massive damage with her S2 as well. So she's pretty much like a slower Kayron that counters, right? So pretty much like how does that work for her? Well, how that work for her is that in the beginning she was pretty okay because that's before we had to add the addition of something called repulse set. Once repulse set basically gives her a 30% chance to counter as long as she evades. Once repulse set came out, it made her really good because now her weakness of we're here, an ally except for the caster evades. Like except for the caster part, it basically made it so when an ally gets hit, pretty much. So yeah, that basically made it really strong because now when you play a repulse set, nobody is safe. Nobody is safe from hitting anybody to dodge a counter. If you hit her, she probably would dodge and she would counter. If you hit your ally, if you hit one of her allies and they dodge, she's guaranteed counter. So pretty much, yeah. And then another character that is also another pretty good mention is Mei Chloe. So Mei Chloe got buffed, and one of her biggest buffs is she grants 50% additional damage reduction, and then she also had VR in her S3 I think got reduced by 1 turn. So what this basically and also gives increased defense as well. So what this basically means that Mei Chloe is basically your safe support in the game. She's the definition of a safe Soul Reaper. She provides additional damage reduction, right? Okay, cool. That basically no one in your team can do damage. no ally can do, like, nobody can do additional damage pretty much because the additional damage reduction is pretty big. Cool. Right, another thing, she has a soul burn on her S1 which gives an extra turn, so this thing, which is like a 4-turn cooldown with a 3-turn uptime, basically means if you ever come down at the soul time, you have 20 souls, you soul burn and you immediately S3 again. So you basically became a spirit isolate pretty much. You spirit isolate your opponent, because you can basically keep your opponent from getting screwed over. Because now you have increased defense to all allies, you basically made your team even harder to kill. So she's ridiculously strong. So she has a revive and an increased defense, which basically makes it impossible for your team to kind of like deal with anything. And then she also has a full turn cleanse on her S3. Actually no, it's dispelled 2 debuffs. Okay, she has to dispel 2 debuffs. That's still pretty strong. That basically makes her pretty impossible to kill. So she became this really, really hard to kill character, and that's pretty much it. Another character that came out was Wretched Rose, but Wretched Rose is not really good. Her entire gimmick is that she can do a full-on turn reversal. So she can literally reverse. She basically set everybody back to the start of the battle, which basically means removes all injury, resets all passive, reset all artifacts, etc., right? That's pretty much what it does. However, the thing about Time Reversal is Time Reversal doesn't reverse death. So she takes like 3 turns to get going, and since she takes like 3 turns to get going, if your opponent kills somebody, it sucks to be you. I'm sorry, you can't do anything about it. So that character's just dead. So this is pretty funny. It's just the fact that it takes like 3 turns for her to get going is a problem. So she's kind of too slow to get around. Okay. From all of that, all that meta talk, let's talk about account review. So starting off with the darks. So the darks, starting off with Lone Wolf Payra. This is my Lone Wolf Payra build. She is 300 speed on about 22k HP because of Sweet Miracle, and then she's just fast with effectiveness. That's pretty much the only way you build her, right? There's another way. There's another version which is to play slower than this, but you play more attack, less HP, slower, probably a little bit slower. You keep the same speed, and you play Uberius Tube. So Uberius Tube gives the extra damage proportional. That basically allows it to do well. The problem with the Uberius Tube build is that a lot of people play Maid Chloe in FCC, especially up in higher ranks. So as a result, it's kind of hard to get Uberius Tube going because Uberius Tube just get like all the reason you use lower Payra gets reduced by a ton because of Uberius. Because Uberius Tube gives the extra damage, and because FCC or Maid Chloe reduces it by 50%. That's so much reduction that Uberius kind of had issues with playing. Alright, so when it comes to Urban Shadow Shu, the next character in the list, Urban Shadow Shu is actually a pretty decent Moonlight 5 this season. So Moonlight Shu is really good at dealing with injury-based characters, not injury-based characters. She's really good at dealing with characters that are that one have an important ability that are a single target, and two are HP scaling. So a lot of times in the early RTA season, you see people pick like Imperial Innerlock and Genesis Rush, or they at least pick Genesis Rush first pick. Urban Shadow Shu is your counter to Genesis Rush. She perfectly counters him because she puts out a lot of injury. She's fast, and most of the time Genesis Rush is pretty slow. She has so much injury. She can basically reduce the damage of Genesis Rush, and on top of that, her S2 also provides the stealth with the EE. So because the stealth with the EE, you basically made this rat who is basically immune to Genesis Rush S2. Because Genesis Rush can't S2 your Urban Shadow Shu, and since he can't S2, he can't take him out. Since he can't take him out, now you're in a situation where Genesis Rush has to S2 somebody else, and then the S3 damage will get massively reduced because Urban Shadow Shu is stealth, so it gets reduced by 50%. So all of that basically, how do we build this? This rat? Well, you build it as fast as possible. You don't really focus on crit chance or crit damage. Crit chance is fine to focus. You don't really focus on crit damage. You rather get as much speed and HP as possible. So for me, I'd rather get an HP% with more HP, with more speed here, and crit chance and crit damage. Because HP is way more important for her. I'd rather have her do chip damage because all her damage really comes from her biz buff, which is her S2 buff. Doesn't really come from her S1 or S3. Her S1 S3 doesn't really do much damage. So crit damage is not as important. Otherwise, build it as fast as possible with 24,000 HP and some defense, and you should be fine. Next up, Briar Witch Iceria. So my Briar Witch Iceria actually is a effectiveness Briar Witch Iceria because I don't think crit builders are great anymore, but even though you could do crit build, and she's as fast as I possibly could, and it puts some HP. So Briar Witch Iceria is, she hasn't really been used this patch. She's only really good if your opponent is playing pretty slow, and they play a combination of Royal Light and Maid Chloe. So when Maid Chloe got buffed, some people started playing Royal Light Maid Chloe. The easiest way to counter that is to play Briar Witch Iceria. Since those two characters are super reliant on having revive, if you pick Briar Witch, your opponent can't revive as long as Briar Witch is alive. So as a result of that, my idea is to build an effectiveness build on her, because what I want her to do is to be able to land debuffs on both the Briar Witch, on both the Royal Light and the Maid Chloe. Since I mentioned, the Maid Chloe lost her effect resistance passive on her S2 in favor of extra damage, you can actually start landing debuffs on the Maid Chloe. If you land the defense break, you can basically nullify the entire defense buff she has. So it's a pretty good way to kind of get around Maid Chloe. It's basically keep her on edge, right? In terms of artifact, the best artifact is probably Guiding Light. You can probably play Bastion for not Bastion, Wall of Order. If you play the DPS Briar Witch, Wall of Order is maybe a pick because you can get Gab and you can get Stealth at the end of turn, right? But Guiding Light is technically better for an effectiveness. Briar Witch, don't want her to get targeted first. Okay, next up, my Sea Phantom Poly. Well, I slowed it down a ton from last season. The reason why is because Sea Phantom's not as good this meta. Aggro is not as good, so Steve Phantom Poly kind of being like an aggro enabler with like Janua isn't really good enough. So I'm not going to dwell on her that much, but in terms of artifact, the best artifact she has is the speed artifact, much speed you can, health as much as you possibly can, so as much effectiveness as you possibly can as well, and then artifact of choice, Space Control Fan is pretty good. I think another another artifact just came out, and that's called like that's Zoid artifact, and Zoid artifact also pretty good on her because I think it grants a seal push after you use a non-attack skill. So that's pretty good on Steve Phantom Poly as well because you can use her as a bridge. But other than that, Steve Phantom Poly hasn't really been used because she's not as impactful as she once was because aggro is not as big in the meta. Next, Zio. So not talking about Zio buff because Zio's going to come with a buff pretty soon, but Zio is actually not so great in this meta. Sure he's an aggro enabler, but other than that, he doesn't do anything you really want. Like, and as I said, aggro's not as crazy in the meta right now. They're not like we need Zio to like aggro everybody. That's it. He's not as strong. Like mine's a DPS Zio. You want him probably faster than this to like maybe 260 to try to challenge anybody who's faster than you. But actually, this will actually probably be fine in the future when he gets buffed. But I'm not gonna really talk about that. But so otherwise, yeah, Zio kind of like he's not good because he kind of doesn't do anything you need him to do. Yeah, he does. Yeah, he does. I think the scaling this is 30% current HP damage. That's good. But there's a lot of bots. Like what does he do after he S3? Well, after he S3, he just pushes somebody back, and that's all he does. So like, yeah, he's not great. Next up, Strade. So Strade is a character who's actually really strong in the meta still, if as long as your opponent doesn't play Imperial enough. So your opponent doesn't play Imperial enough and they just have DPS, Strade is pretty strong. Just they don't have Imperial enough or they don't have later skills. Because what you can do is you can S2, S3, you can with his EE, as long as you kill somebody with the greater attack buff and the crit damage buff, the S3, S2 combo does so much damage it basically wipes your opponent. If your opponent doesn't have any damage limiter or doesn't have any form of damage mitigation that isn't pen res. So we're not talking about like Aureus, right? Because Aureus won't matter. He will basically wipe somebody out. So he's a pretty good aggro unit with Armin. And then the way to build him, you can build him slower than this if you're more interested in doing more damage, or you can build him a lot faster, like 251 with as much damage as possible, and you play it with Armin. So the faster build just basically means it makes him less likely to get cut by someone with like a the Ludicrous, the Summer Ludicrous artifact, the Soul Constellation, right? Basically makes it less likely he'll get cut by Soul Constellation if you play Strade with pretty fast speed and Armin. Okay, next up, Pirate Captain Flan. We're not going to be talking about it. She's not used at all in this meta. The problem with Pirate Captain Flan is she is too delayed. She doesn't do anything, and Control kind of just screws herself over sometimes. Because if you get 50% and you don't land the bombs, you kind of waste your stat. She's a decent aggro unit because she has the increased CO push, but really because of the scales and because of how much cleanse there in the game right now, full burst is it's kind of easy to get around. It's too easy to pop. We need a way to pop all of them that isn't using like a Moonlight 4 version, right? Because if you play all bombs, you're kind of like opening up yourself to getting cleansed or getting controlled or getting like laser scaled pretty much. So yeah, Pirate Captain Fun unfortunately is not used as often nowadays. She's only funny as an aggro unit, and that's really it. Next, Archdemon Shadow. So Archdemon Shadow, she's not really used this meta. What single target ignore your seal on a dual attack is pretty funny, but a lot of time because of how laser scales it, it's kind of hard to figure out why you need a seal in the first place. So like a lot of times there's too many characters to seal. Since there's too many characters to seal, one seal is not enough. You need more than you need like an AoE seal, or you just kill them outright. So most of the time, Archdemon Shadow is kind of hard because a lot of times characters are probably too tanky. So if you're playing against solo people, which Archdemon Shadow is supposed to be good against, they're probably too tanky. If they're too tanky or they run immunity, nothing Archdemon Shadow can do. right? Or and if they play fast, Oshima Shadow isn't good into fast characters because Oshima Shadow has no real protection for herself, so she kind of just gets absolutely nuked. So yeah, that's kind of a problem with Oshima Shadow. If you want to build her as fast as possible, some speed and some effectiveness, that's all you need. Book is obviously the best on her because you can solo and no ER. Just be wary about people who play immunity. Next up, Hand Guy. So Hand Guy got his EE over the patch, I think. The biggest one he got is that his S2 no longer crits, but a full pens, and it does reduce damage. He's okay this meta. He's not the best, he's not the worst. So even with the speed, he's okay. Like he has a full cleanse and all that stuff, and his S2 does a pretty good amount of damage against people with full pen, against people with good defense. Right? That's it. That's all he's good on. If you want to build him speed, HP, and probably effectiveness. That's like the only thing you really need to build him on. Effectiveness is okay, it's really funny. And I chose to build him Durando because that's just the best one I have. But other than that, nah. Like he's not really the best. Okay, we're gonna skip Pilot, so Pilot's not built, Ino's not really built. FCC, so FCC is actually a meta-defining character of this game. She is the knight with the she's actually the one who started off the passive, so that's why I'm gonna refer to Meikoi as the FCC passive. So she grants 50% additional damage reduction, or also known as extra damage reduction, and then she grants barrier, and on top of that she has a full debuff strip. So she has a full strip, and then she transfers debuff, and she has a no EO provoke on the S1 with Soulburn. So what that means for FCC is that FCC is pretty much your premier safe tank. So if you want a tank that does everything, like has Aria, like reduces damage because of barrier, has 50% additional damage reduction, she's your gal. She's basically like the best knight to just mitigate damage. So if you have her, just build her. So she's really good. You play on Arias obviously. And the build you build on speed and immunity with as much as, when you want some speed, as much HP as possible you can get into it, and then some effectiveness if you want. Effectiveness is better than February Resistance because effectiveness means you can start stripping debuff. So FCC is a really good character in this meta because she provides so much damage reduction for free, especially if you start to pick players like Viren, or you pick heroes like Spirit Isolate. She's pretty good. Next up, D-Lily. So D-Lilybet, it's not so good in this meta because this meta has been less about debuffs nowadays and more about just doing straight raw damage. So like someone like Fearin, right, does raw damage. Someone like Spirit Isolate does raw damage. So D-Lilybet kind of lost a lot of her aspects because nobody really plays as much control, and anyone who really plays control probably plays Meluna control. And since Meluna has a seal, D-Lilybet actually doesn't get her passive. So yeah, D-Lilybet's not as good. When it comes to building D-Lilybet, if you're interested with her, build her speed and crit or speed and defense if you can do it, and build her at least 210 to 220 speed with as much HP and at least 2k defense and some crit. That's all you need to build her. She's hard to build. Next up, Orbi. I'm not going to talk about Orbi. Orbi's not really used, doesn't matter. He's a pretty funny nuker, and that's all he is. So like that's really it. He's not used because doing his damage is not good enough nowadays. Not well, at least defense break, and even then the characters he could face could be way too tanky that he doesn't really do anything. Or he faces someone like Warlord, who kind of nullifies his one-shot potential. Okay. Bloodbreak BBK. So BBK is a okay character. She's pretty good as a frontline character with Lady Scales because she basically puts Lady Scales with 3 turns of immortality. So the first turn of immortality, and then the Lady Scales buff proc immortality, and then her own immortality with the EE. So she has 3 turns of immortality pretty much, all separate. So what that basically means is that if you play BBK, you can kind of delay the 70% damage share. Since she has pretty much low HP almost all the time, and she revives the low HP she had, she actually gets double benefits for being like that. So BBK is a pretty good. If you want to build her, you have 2 ways. The way I build her, which is a Destro build with Electric Basket, which is basically to nuke somebody, or you play her on a resistance set with probably like Galileo sort of hat, and you kind of resist everything. You kind of use her like a wall for your scale. So she's pretty good, and she's pretty cool, and she's pretty annoying, especially if she can last long enough. Next up, Dissimilarly Perfect Aria. So Moonlight Aria is a very okay character. She's really good if your opponent is playing a lot of Sobers. So your opponent is playing Genesis Rods, your opponent is playing Maluna, right? Dictionary Prefect Oya, Dictionary Prefect Oya is really OP. She's ridiculously good against these characters because for Genesis Rods, if Genesis Rods doesn't have any form of outside Soulburn, he cannot Soulburn the S2. Since he can't Soulburn the S2, if he doesn't land the buffs, or he doesn't land the debuffs that he has, his S2 is not going to do anything. So yeah, so she's pretty good at just shutting down Genesis Rods, which is pretty fun. When it comes to build, you want to build it on Destro Pen because counter pen is pretty sus. You want to build as much destruction, as much crit damage as possible, as much HP defense and some speed. So you don't need crit chance because she has a guaranteed crit on all her abilities. And then the best auto pattern for her is Prayer of Solitude. You could play Golden Rose if you want more healing because she has no innate healing, but Prayer of Solitude just basically makes it bulkier, gives your team more effective resistance, and basically makes her a lot harder to kill. So she's good against Soulburn spamming characters. Other than that, she's not the best. She's not the best. Like she's not like a really safe DPS. She's kind of slow, and she doesn't really do as much as you want her to. She does a pretty good amount of damage. Don't get me wrong. Just if you're using her and your opponent doesn't really rely on Soulburns, well, she doesn't do anything. So. Next up, we're gonna skip S10A, Apoc Ravi, A-Cut because I don't use them. Aufine is another kit that I use a bit. She's really good at a way to reduce CO push. So you see your opponent's kind of relying on like a Furin having the S3 S1 combo, right? Or they're really relying on having the Swift attack. Abyssal Aufine is your answer. Abyssal Aufine cuts CO pushes by 50%. And then on top of that, she also is ridiculously tanky, and she scales, and as long as she keeps having pushes, she probably would kill somebody. Like as long as if she gets this S2 up, her S2 probably would kill someone because it does a lot of damage. So Aufine is a very good character in order to shut down any form of CO push. If you think your opponent's CO push is way too much, Aufine is your answer to that. So how do you build her? The best way to build her is to build her some speed, and it's a crit chance, crit damage, and as much HP defense as possible. And you build on Elbrus Ritual Sword. Best build for her is Lifesteal set with Immunity. Lifesteal set because every time she counters, she's going to heal a bit, and Immunity because you don't want her to get debuffed turn 1. So as long as she has Immunity, she's basically immune to a lot of like the non-strip debuffs. So that's pretty good. Okay, last two characters that I was talking about. New Kid Auden. New Kid Auden is decent in this meta. She's very good against characters who are who are counter-based. So if you're a character, not counter-based, but characters who don't really have either force AoE or don't really do much. Right, so if you face a character like Blind, right, with a force AoE, New Kid Auden is a very good Blind counter. Because New Kid Auden will, every time Blind S1 and New Kid Auden dodges, she's going to counter the Blind, and it's not CO pushing, so running up the bar. So any force AoE is really good for New Kid Auden. On top of that, she's pretty good against characters like Imperial Ilanov, because Imperial Ilanov can't actually really hit the New Kid Auden, and anytime she tries, New Kid Auden will just injure her and stuff like that. However, she's not as good into Genesis Wrath because Genesis Wrath can always S2 S3 Soulburn into her, and since she always S2 S3 Soulburn, and because even though she has immunity or I have immunity, because of how her S2 passive works and she gains CO, she will actually probably outpush the Genesis Wrath, and Genesis Wrath will be able to get her. And if Genesis Wrath gets the S2 S3 off of her, she kind of just dies. So a lot of that, it's a balancing act. She might be okay into Genesis Wrath because if she has the bigger buff, she can S3 into the Genesis Wrath and do a ton of a ridiculous amount of injury damage. But otherwise, she will just get wrecked by Genesis Wrath. So it's a balancing act, and you just have to play it around it. When it comes to build, use two builds. You either play Destro Immunity or Lifesteal Immunity. If you're playing Destro, you want to go for the healing on the S1. If you're Lifesteal, you want to go for the S2E. That's it. And then the best artifact, of course, is Shepherd the Hollow because she's going to get hit a little bit, and if she gets hit a little bit, why not do more damage to heal more? That's pretty funny. Okay. Last but not least, Horseti. So Horseti is a character who is really good at slowing down your opponent. If you see your opponent playing Cleave, right, and they have no form of way to stop you, Horseti is by far the best character in the game. Horseti basically makes it so everybody plays slow. So she basically makes it so you can't play fast because everybody can play slow. However, Hoseidi's not as used in the meta because Hoseidi doesn't really do well against characters like Fury. She doesn't really do characters against Spirit Isolene because these characters don't really matter. She doesn't really do good against characters like Roar of Light, right, or Barranca. So since we see a lot of scales of Barranca and stuff in the game, Hoseidi's not the best character to do it, but she's still really good. She's by far the best character to deal with people who are really aggressive. So your opponent tends to play really fast, and your opponent just didn't ban Hoseidi for some reason. Hoseidi's like the best pick. Your opponent picked like Armin, like all that stuff, and they didn't ban Hoseidi. You pick Hoseidi, you basically run over your opponent because now everybody has to play slow and everybody has to play get OG. So yeah. Okay, that's it for the ducks. Next up, the lights. So the lights, we're gonna talk about the first part is New Moon Luna. New Moon Luna is a very good debuffer. Even 1 or 2 years later, she's still really good. She had the indoor EOC unbuffable. That basically makes it so she basically negates all passes in the game. If your opponent doesn't have cleanse and they don't respect the New Moon Luna, she kind of just wraps everybody. So she's a very good control unit. Nowadays, people have been slowing her down, so she's not playing like 300 speed as much anymore. People have been playing like 280, 290 speed with like 24,000 HP. So keep that in mind that people have been playing her slower in order to counter characters like Lobo Pera, who plays pretty fast. And with all of that, right, you S3, you seal everybody, get rid of all the buffs, and since everybody's in more or everybody's unsealed and stuff, you can basically hit. So Sasuke's not a problem because Sasuke is super reliant on her passive. And since she's super reliant on her passive, getting sealed is the worst case scenario. So yeah, good for her. Next up, Sea Lily. So Sea Lily has actually got a massive resurgence when she got changed. So the massive change she got is that her S2 now CO pushes, and her S2 now decreases defense and no longer pushback. The big change is, of course, the S2 being CO pushing instead of a pushback, instead of a S2 now being a pushback. This is super important because it means she actually pushes pretty fast. she actually acts like a fast bridge, so she's a good aggro unit actually in this game. And she's really good with characters like Fury because you can S3, give yourself bigger, then S2 defense break like say the Barranca, and then Fury will go S3 and then she do so much damage to probably one-shot the Barranca outright because it's debroken. So how you build her? You build her as fast as possible with effectiveness and some speed, and basically speed, effectiveness, and HP. That's all you need. Best artifact of choice is Nostalgia Music Box. Technically for free, it's a free one. If you don't have Nostalgia Music Box, another one that actually could technically work. Sweet Miracles could maybe work if you think you can get debuffed by like a Zeo, but that's not really going to help you. If you have maybe if you are lucky, like maybe Pure White Trust maybe will work because you get 10 souls and you increase your own crit damage. So the 10 souls you can use to sober to S2, right? Which will extend the debuff of both the duration of the provoke and the decreased defense by 1 turn. So instead of being 1 turn, it's 2 turns. So that's okay. It's pretty funny. I wouldn't recommend it. I think it's hilarious, but yeah, just stick with the story music box. It probably will work. Number 2, so this is my favorite character to use this entire meta, Spirit Isolene. So Spirit Isolene is a character that is that basically like does the Meikoi type thing where she had immortality, so she basically makes the team impossible to kill, and then every time somebody dies, she reduces her cooldowns of this by 1 turn. So and then on top of that, she also has a free EE that basically gives her she has a massive strike as long as she has a buff, so she doesn't need to have this possession buff. Even though possession is a buff, she doesn't need it anymore because she can immediately, as long as she have a buff at the start of battle, she can sober to do massive damage. Because this sober increases sober the first of the first sober that she does by 50%, and then also is free. So she can basically, she allows her to basically be in like this kind of aggro unit to kind of one-shot a lot of the soul weavers in the game, like Lady Scales, like Meikoi. So if you pair her with a character that can buff, right, she can sober and get the big old nimble strike, which basically does maybe like with my build does pretty much about 19,000 damage. And then on top of that, if I think I need 1 more damage, I can do Sober again. And if I have a 2-turn barrier, congratulations, I nimble strike this guy again, and then he's gonna basically get obliterated. So Spread Isolate is very good at just picking somebody off and being a star heavy character. So in order to build her, if you have it, the best artifact she has is Sever Photogenic. So Photogenic is by far the best artifact. It gives increased attack, that's good. But the biggest thing is that it ignores damage sharing effects. So as I mentioned with Lady Scales, damage sharing effects is by far the most overpowered part of Lady Scales kit, and you basically have an aerial unit that basically ignores that. So you can one-shot Lady Scales and laugh at your opponent because they can't do anything about it. So, when it comes to a build, you want to build a speed pen on and as fast as possible while not using your attack. Crit damage. You want as much crit damage attack crit chance as possible while having as much speed as possible. The faster the speed, the more likely she will to one-shot a Lady Scale, or the more likely she will to one-shot a Dinosaur. So faster the better, because you want her to keep cycling. Okay, next up, Lady Scale. So I already talked about Lady Scale. You want to build her relatively fast for some HP, and then I cause a lot of effect resistance because she has 30% base effect resistance plus 27% in her E and her imprint. And I think her imprint is free because she's technically considered a boss character. So all of that culminates to the fact that she has a crap ton of, she has a crazy amount of effect resistance, and she wants you want HP and some speed. Why you want HP? The more HP you have, the less likely you get one shot Spirit Isolate. That's the idea. So, anyways, best artifact Koala Magic Wand, which is the same, which is basically the retrofit version of Golden Ice Crystal. So Golden Ice Crystal is one of her best artifacts because it just allows it to passively do some healing as people get hit, and it basically makes it really hard for your characters who are under protection by the offering or by the offering unique effect, right? 7% damage sharing. It basically gives those characters a lot harder, it makes them a lot harder to kill, because on top of the 70% damage reduction they're taking, or 70% damage share they're taking, they also get a heal outside if they get low enough. So if you have this, Koala Magic Wand is pretty good artifact on her, and because of how fast she is, because of her seal push and stuff, she probably will always keep cycling so fast, she can probably outscale. She'll probably keep this up forever. Okay, next up, Balion. So Balion only became relevant in this manner because of Fearin. So Fearin, as I mentioned with Fearin requires souls in order to keep up with passive, but Balion basically removes all souls in the game. So if you have Balion is a pretty good counter into Fearin, because Balion is how you negate Fearin's entire gimmick with her passive, and as long as Fearin doesn't have a passive, she's very vulnerable. Nobody really builds her with HP, and even then, if people try to build her with HP, she's really squishy for a mage. So because of all of that, she kind of just gets one shot as long as Fearin doesn't have the thing. She kind of gets one shot. The best build for Balion, in my opinion, is to build her fast with as much HP as you have in 3F. Why 3F? 3F is because you want extra damage on Balion. So as long as she's fast, she's going to keep poking your opponent like one after the other, probably do 2,000 chip damage. And if she continues to do 2,000 chip damage, right, your opponent will eventually burn themselves out. It's basically you're playing like a burn variation of Balion. Another variation I see that people do run, they put 3F on counter, so that they can counter and do 3F damage. That's pretty funny, but I think counter is not as important unless you're playing unless you think that your opponent's gonna hit you a ton. I'd rather be more proactive and just be faster. So it's up to you. Build wise, just focus HP speed and probably effectiveness, because you want to maybe strip of her S1. Like the S1 strip is pretty funny, but other than that, yeah. Next up, Solitaria. I'm gonna quickly go over. She's just good for any type of focus reduction. There's not crazy amount of focus characters in the game that you tend to worry about for Solid Snow, so don't really worry about Solid Snow as much anymore. If you want to build a Crown's the best, or Crown, or you have it Fairy Tale for Nightmares, technically probably better. You build it as fast as possible with some HP and effectiveness. Sage Boss was on. He's okay. When he got his buff, he was decent. Because what you can do, you can slow burn the S2 if you have enough effectiveness. You can sleep somebody, get an extra turn to S3 to instantly one-shot them. Even then, it's kind of funky because his HP is not the best, and all that combined, he's not the best character. So he's still not really good in this meta, and it's kind of sad. Nobody really uses him as much. Even when you try to cleave somebody, he's not the best anti-cleaver. You rather use scales. You rather do Light, make Chloe, stuff like that, right? Next up, improvising Katie's another thing. She's only good against Luna, and that's kind of it. So, other than that, I won't really talk about her. Like she just has speed and fight resistance and HP. That's it. That's all she has. Oh, A-Tower we're gonna skip. I don't have it built, but A-Tower is not really good in this meta either. Usually you pick him with Orius, but he's not the best. Saber Auden. Not really good. Okay, let me skip her. New kid, Lost Red Crowd. So Lost Red Crowd is actually an adaptation I made against Fearin. So, if you remember what I said about Fearin, everything about her kid's AoE. So since everything about her kid's AoE, Lost Red Crowd is supercharged because a lot of crowd keeps getting 2-turn reduced damage on a mobile weapon secret. And then on top of that, since because of how his thing works, he also reduces shield cooldown by 1 turn for all allies. So basically, what this means is that Lost Red Crowd is he's just spamming. He's going fast. So you want to build him probably faster this with more probably like the same amount of HP faster and some effect resistance and then some defense. We don't really need effect resistance. On top of that, when you build him, you want to build him on Crown of Glory. Why Crown of Glory? So Crown of Glory reduces damage dealt by AoE damage, right? But AoE damage is basically Fearin's bread and butter. So if your opponent plays Fearin and Belian, which is very common, Fearin and Belian kind of just like nukes, kind of gets reduced damage. So you get the 2 birds 1 stone of 50% damage reduction for all AoE tasks. That's good. And on top of that, since Belian and Fearin are both AoE centric, you also remove fire souls for every time they hit you. So since they hit you, since they do that, right? Congratulations! Now Belian and Fearin are reducing their turns by 10, and they're also supercharging your Lost Red Crowd, so you can keep your Lost Red Crowd alive, which is pretty funny. So all of that combined, Lost Red Crowd is a character who's really good against Fearin. When your opponent is playing a lot of like blind Fearin, they're playing pretty fast. The Lost Red Crowd can drain Fearin's souls, and then eventually when Fearin gets exposed, she kind of gets to get poked out. She gets taken out by the Lost Red Crowd, or at least by one of your teammates. Next up, Warlord Light. So the craziest staller in the game right now. So Warlord Light, when she got her EE, she applies her S3 to herself, which basically this is a massive change because it basically means you no longer have to pick between an ally or Warlord Light to keep her alive. When you pick Warlord Light with her EE, you always pick her ally all the time because she always will full heal herself and to put immortality on herself. No, not immortality, invincibility on herself. So she basically is the master stall in the game, and if you want to, the best artifact technically for her is to play this 3-star artifact called Prophetic Candlestick. Because as long as she keeps getting hit, she keeps getting reduced damage, she keeps getting reduced cooldown, and if she keeps getting reduced cooldown, she can keep spamming out the skill 3. If she keeps spamming out the skill 3, your opponent can't do anything about it. So yeah, she's pretty good with that. I prefer going to Ice Crystals myself because I like to be more proactive with like dealing with like getting damage with like Spirit Iceling, but I'd rather keep my Spirit Iceling alive over like having to keep reviving her every other turn and rely on the RNG of getting it. So going to Ice Crystals I prefer. When it comes to her build, speed and HP is technically good. I would recommend if you were to build a speed immunity is probably better. Speed immunity basically makes it so she's not as susceptible to getting debuffed by like a Mort. So a Mort like S3 full on thing, Mort S3 for the ignore your fear is pretty annoying. So speed immunity is probably better. But even speed HP is fine. The more HP she has, the harder she is to kill. So I play speed HP. She's 22k with 2k defense and 121 defense resistance and 207 speed. You want as much speed as you possibly can because you want to cycle, and that's all you really want. Okay, next up SSB. I'm not gonna have SSB. SSB is not really used. Sea Omen. So Sea Omen got an EE over the course of the patch. Sea Omen's E basically gave her one of the most important E gives her S3 or S2 actually 10% more damage reduction, increasing it to 25%. So she's basically the best mitigation knight in the game, like hands down. She reduces damage taken by 25%, and then she can wear Orius, and she had a barrier, and she had invincibility, she had immunity. Like she's really strong in the thing. But the problem is that a lot of the time you kind of don't really need this. Like she's good to use, you don't really need this. Like most of the time. When you tend to build her, you want to build her now decently fast. You don't want to build her base speed now because you want her to be able to get this S3 off. So you build her a little bit fast with some HP, and an immunity set, of course. and you put it on Aureus and you just wait them out. That's pretty much it. You play the stars setup, so she's good. Damage reduction is always good. It's just when you play with Lady Scales, damage reduction is not really the best when you play Lady Scales, so yeah. Okay, that's up Dragon Bright Senya. So Dragon Bright Senya is a character that I use sometimes. She's a very good character just to punish anyone who try to AoEs a ton and you play like a squishy backline and they don't have any real form of penetration red. If they don't have any form of penetration red, Dragon Bright Senya, once she activates being immune to all debuff, basically makes it so she's impossible to kill. She's basically the definition of a reversal. She can reverse a lot of things. Otherwise, nothing changed from the last time I built her, so it's just speed and then HP with defense, and then you don't need anything else, and you just need 3F. So 3F is technically a better artifact because she has the highest HP base, technically the highest HP in the game, other than Genesis Wrath. So actually, but even then, Genesis Wrath doesn't have a good HP baseline as Dragon Bright Senya. So Dragon Bright Senya is the best HP in the game. Next up, Genesis Wrath. Genesis Wrath, as I mentioned before, you want to build on Destro and HP. Destro, why Destro? Because why not reversal set? So reversal set, that what I get 50% heal on death after you revive. Why not reversal set? Because reversal set is because Genesis Wrath is still relying on having these stats that you really need Destro set to kind of prop up your stats. So when it comes to Genesis Wrath, you build them as much HP as you can with full guaranteed crit chance and crit damage. Because speed is not as important, but I would recommend not playing base speed. The slower he is, the more susceptible he is to getting immunity spam, or the more susceptible he is to getting Moonlight Shoot. So, and then his best artifact is of course a Precious Connection. If you really think about it, you could play the whatever the artifact for the Blue Thorn Rose, I think, artifact. But Blue Thorn Rose doesn't activate on the S3, so you rather just use this artifact. It's technically better. It gives more souls. So what is it? I have it. Whatever. But yeah, the Blue Thorn Rose, which gives his soul burn 10% more damage. It's funny, but his S2 soul burn doesn't really do much damage. So yeah, that's an alternative if you don't want to use Precious Connection. But yeah. Okay, next up, Lionheart Sermon. So Lionheart Sermon actually is a pretty good character in this game because of her EE. Her EE reduces extra damage taken, or like all the damage taken from extra attack, counter attack, or dual attack, all the things that activates her by 50%. So basically, what this makes her, it makes her immune to basically like AS Flan. So Afternoon Soak Flan can't actually one-shot her anymore, even with a D-break, because even through the D-break, right, Lionheart Sermon is probably still should take like maybe 28,000, and that gets reduced to 14k. So. And of course you probably have Aureus or something to protect her. So all of that basically makes it so she's basically really hard to kill, and she gets the 50% skill push on the S2, and then the S2 will do a lot of damage. So you play her on Golden Rose, which is the best artifact for her now because you want her just to heal when she does damage. When it comes to the build, Destro build is probably the best, and you go Destro Immunity. Why Immunity? Immunity because you don't want her to get debuffed at the start of the battle. If you can keep her from getting debuffed, people are less likely to go after her. People are less likely to go after her. She will just keep activating over and over and over again, and she eventually will wipe your opponent. So she's pretty good at just doing that. Build-wise, I would recommend building some speed, as much defense as you can, crit damage, crit chance, and probably some HP. Most people run her like maybe 12 to 14k HP, but I think it's pretty low. I prefer to run at 17,000 to make sure that Lionheart doesn't really get one shot. So other than that, yeah, she's pretty cool. Next up, Imperial Illanov. I run a Imperial Illanov is a really good pen res unit, and she's only there for pen res. That's it. She's only good against characters that are really pen heavy. So all the characters like Benya, like Genesis Wrath, right? If Genesis Wrath doesn't steal her, like Genesis Wrath damage is massively cut down by Imperial Illanov, or like even Strade, right? So the way I built her, I built a Destro Immunity. Immunity by far is required on her. You need immunity on her. And then Destro, because I played her as like a kind of like a sub tank. You could build, if you don't want to play Destro, you can always play like HP set, immunity set, not immunity, HP set, barrier set, stuff like that, and you build her with way more HP. But I chose to play her like a bruiser. Best artifact, if you play as a bruiser, is Rise of the Monarch. If you don't play as a bruiser, the best artifact I think is Aureus. So you gotta go Aureus or ready to go Holy Sack. So that's like otherwise. So next up, Yeah, TE run. So Twisted Outline Cameron is actually pretty okay in this meta. He's really good at shutting down characters like Fearin because if not really Fearin, but characters who don't really do much damage. So if your opponent like plays like I don't know blind, right? And they blinds like the only DPS and they only really do chip damage. TE run's really good at dealing with blind because every time blind try to S1, TE Cameron's gonna do this AOE injury on his S1. On top of that, he also will get himself a barrier, and eventually he will get 100% fighting spirit. He will S3 and he will do 20,000 extra damage to everybody. Where TE Cameron kind of falls short is because we have access to characters like Mei Chloe now, and since Mei Chloe reduces extra damage taken by 50%, TE Cameron only does 10,000, reverting back to his old state. So his old state when he used to do 10,000 damage was pretty bad. So it's going to be bad to that, and he's not as good anymore because of Mei Chloe. So it's like what can you do with like Mei Chloe to Mei Chloe. So yeah, if you're building him, there's two ways. The way I build him is really funny. I build him just all HP and immunity, just to have 30,000 HP, just to be funny. If you want to, another way to build him is to build him like on a relatively DPS or lifesteal. So you play lifesteal immunity, then you play no speed, and you play way less HP with more attack and more crit damage. That basically allows him to try to nuke somebody when he gets hit. He's really good. I would mention he's really good when paired with Lady the Scales, because Lady Scales can reduce the damage he takes, basically allowing him to scare to kind of delay him further. Last but not least are the characters we're going to talk about, because all the other characters like Neighbor Kind of Lady isn't really good. So Bartarinka is a character that is ridiculously strong, especially on the build I run. So one of her most annoying builds possible is to play double HP, 1 immunity set, and you play your Proof of Valor. Why? Because you make her this 28k HP, 2.6k defense Giga tank. And since you play this 20 HP Giga tank, there's nothing you can do. Your opponent has to like try to chew through her, and it takes a long time because she nearly takes 30% reduced damage. And on top of that, you maybe play Run Aureus on her, so you take an additional 20% reduced damage because she also has Aureus on somebody. Build wise, you focus on this type of build. You focus defense and HP with basically no speed and effect resistance and some effectiveness. That's all you focus on. Alright, that's a lot of session. Okay, after all the lights and all the okay, now we're gonna speed up because the OGBs is not so good. So the OGB, the few OGBs I'm talking about, Renok is a decent OGB. She's really good at being able to reduce your stats of the character by 20% that she hits with the S2. It doesn't need to hit, and the S3 does on 7k extra damage, which is pretty good. Especially against someone like Fearin. If you can S2 to Fearin and you S3 somebody else, you can do 7k pop to the Fearin and probably one-shot her. But as I mentioned, Mei Chloe's in the game, and Mei Chloe kind of negates that. So it's a balancing act of can you use her because Mei Chloe's not there. If Mei Chloe's not there, we're not doing a very good counter Fearin. Because because Fearin will usually don't have more than 7,000 HP, so taking out 20% of her stats guarantees that 7k damage will instantly pop her. When it comes to build, in my opinion, you build it as fast as possible, and that's pretty much it. Just build it as fast as possible. Effectiveness is great, attack is great, anything you get other than crit damage, just get her HP, speed, attack, and power effectiveness. Just as much as you possibly can. That's all you need on her. Artifact wise, Discreet Hands by far the best because this is the only character that debuffs to themselves is Renok. So yeah, we're not gonna talk about Lila. Oh, Lila has an E now. Oh, I never knew about that. Okay. Glooming Liquor, no. Sneal's only a DDO counter. That's all I'll say about him. And then the last but not least, the second character to talk about on the green, Fearin. So Fearin's a really overpowered character, as I mentioned before, with how Fearin passive work. The two builds you see for her is Speed on Torrent or Gestro Immunity. So Speed Torrent, the entire idea of Speed Torrent is that you cycle so fast, you always keep up her soul. But the downside of that, her damage is not as good. When you play Destro and Immunity, her damage is ridiculously good, which is she's just slower. It's gonna be up to you which setup you want to do, but otherwise she is your safe DPS. She's really strong. Best artifact of choice is Mirrored Lotus Ring. That's just because it's basically in a book that gains 2 souls at the end of every one of her turns, and since Fearin usually scales pretty fast, or she cycles pretty fast, you can kind of like abuse this to gain 4 souls every turn, which basically because this gains 1 soul, this gains 1 soul, and this gains 2 soul. She gains 4 turns every soul, giving her the chance to always have this barrier up at the end of every one of her turns. So she's a very good kid. Last but not least, for the character that actually I built also as another counter to her, it's Yuha. So Yuha is a character that's really good at shutting down Fearin because of this specific part of her kit, which is she reflects 40 or 60% of her EE damage to the suffered attacker. And since Fearin is usually paired with Armored Fearin kind of just gets Armored Fearin kind of does 20,000 damage to everybody, and 20,000 damage, 60% of 20,000 damage is more than 7k. Like it's way off more than 7k. Since it's way off more than 7k, it's 12k. Like do the math. It's 12k damage to Fearin, right? 12k damage to Fearin is an instant one shot. Fearin just instantly kills herself. So it's pretty funny, and Yuha is one of the best ways to counter Fearin. The artifact of choice I picked her is Bastion of Pelusia. Why Bastion of Pelusia? Bastion of Pelusia because I'd like to play her with Spirit Eye Celine to put the immortality on her, so make it so she always has 1 HP, and her big ol' SP nuke basically can one shot. Why is this so good on her? This is so good on her because the SP also ignores damage sharing effects. Since it ignores damage sharing effects, a lady that's scaled actually can't really stop her from killing somebody with the S3, and the S3 at max stats is probably like 20-something thousand damage. And with Soulburn, it can probably reach like 30 something, so it's a lot of damage. And on top of that, I should also mention, if you have a barrier, right, the barrier still counts as damage taken. So if you like, even if the Fearin only really did 10k total damage because of the barrier stuff, she technically did 19,000 damage because I have the Bastion of Pelusia. So she still reflects 20,000 damage because she technically took 20,000. She just only really took a total of 10k. So Bastion is really good because the extra barrier just keeps her alive a little bit. Okay, next up, the ice. So the two ice we're really going to talk about here is just Armored and Origin Heya Heya. Armored, as I mentioned, is a fast character with as I mentioned, with the E that's really overpowered. Best way to build her, as much speed as possible with some HP. That's it. That's all you need. And then you use it to aggro cleave like your opponent with like Fearin, with like Strade and stuff like that. You just have to be pretty careful because if you're playing armored Fearin and your opponent picks Yuha, your Fearin is a lost card. It's a write-off. Straight up 100% write-off. So be kind of careful about that. Next up, Ocean Wave Hwayong is a very good aggro bridge unit. So how she works is that if your opponent uses a non-attack skill, she will S2, she will CO push herself, she will target the highest defense with Pen, and then after that she will S3. With the S3, she will CO push whoever's in the background with 50%. So what this basically means is that she's a very good bridge unit. You pick, I don't know, if you were to cleave, right? You pick like Meluna, right? Meluna S3 Soulburn, you seal everybody, Ocean Wave Hwayong CO pushes 20%. You S3 with Ocean Wave Hwayong, and then you go to like a Strade or like a Fear and you just wipe everybody. That's the fun part. So when it comes to a build, I personally like to build her as fast as possible because I like to guarantee that I don't always run her on Vigor to guarantee that her turn. If you think you'll run her on Vigor all the time like C Lydius, Ocean Wave Hwayong is best probably slower with more damage. But I don't run that all the time, so it's better that I prefer higher speed with less damage, and then you run her in terms of build, you run her on speed torrent, and then all you really do is you just one shot your opponent. You do damage, you bridge your character. Best artifact for her is of course photogenic because ignoring damage here is just really important for her. Okay, that's all for the blues because all the other blues are not so great right now and I don't use them. Last but not least, the fire. We're not gonna talk about Eligos. Eligos not really used. Festive Ada. She's a character that I really love using in around the midpoint of the season. So why I love to use her? Because midway about like at the beginning of the season she got buffed. So now her S3, the strip that used to be on her S2 got moved to the S3. So now it dispelled 2 buffs, and then with an 85% chance of decreased defense. So now the decreased defense has been moved from the S2 to the S3 again. And then now the S1 also silences on top of that. And if you see this really funny Soulburn tag, ignore your. So the funny part, if you play SF Ada really fast on book, and your opponent is playing pretty slow, like they're playing like say Brian, right? They play like not Brian, they play like Barunka, they play like Ilonov. You can start with FS of Ada, you can soul burn, and then you can kind of like you kind of explode, you can kind of defense break everybody. And since Barunka's defense broken, you go to like Spirit Iceline, and congratulations, you one shot the Barunka, because Barunka has like 70% reduced defense, and you do a ton of damage. So it's pretty funny. I like it. Next up, Veronica. Veronica's not, she's only used to kind of counter like a lot of the immortality shenanigans. She's not really used because even though the immortality shenanigan of Recall is pretty annoying, of Scales is pretty annoying, it's not really worth using Veronica over. You rather just kind of deal with it. So yeah, Veronica's okay. She's a good speed imprint though. That's all I say. She's a good speed imprint. So if you're an aggro unit and you're a speed imprinter, she's really good. ARAM is another character I would recommend building. So ARAM is probably going to be the last character I talked about here because no other character is kind of as important. So ARAM is really important here because ARAM is a character that gives you a full turn reset on characters, which is incredibly strong. So if you imagine you play like aggro, right? And you play like Genesis Ross. So you play Army Genesis Ross ARAM. You can use Genesis Ross to S2 S3 wipe somebody in Guild Wars, and then after that you can ARAM send them back to S2 S3 somebody again. So it's pretty funny. ARAM is pretty cool. She's a very cool character. I like using her. The main selling point of her is that her S2 grants. If the enemy starts the turn, right, she's a very good anti-aggro, anti-control unit. Because if the enemy starts the turn, right, she gets immunity to allies for 3 turns. What 3 turns immunity does, it basically nullifies all the characters who don't strip. So a lot of characters in this game for aggro, they start off like Josetti, they don't strip actually. They actually have 2 turn reduced cooldown. So 2 turn reduced cooldown means that they reduce the cooldown of immunity by 2 turns, but since you still have 1 more turn of immunity left, you actually don't get landed any debuff. So characters like Josetti, right, get screwed over. Characters like Pera has a 1 turn. Characters like Hellion Lua, I don't have Hellion Lua. Characters like Hellion Lua has also get screwed over because Hellion Lua is a 2 turn decrease. It's not 2 buff strip. 2 turn decrease, which is enough to basically make it so you don't get provoked. So ARAM is really good against a lot of these early game control units. So even good against Litica, because Litica is actually not a strip. It's a 2 turn buff. It's a 1 turn buff duration decrease. That's so strong. She's really good against shutting those type of characters down. So in the end, when it comes to characters like this, so this OTA season has been pretty good. This is probably the last season I would do OTA, like time this high. But otherwise, I wish everybody the best of luck in your final day or so. And hopefully, I hope you find my account insight. I hope you found my account like set up for Warlord insightful. Like, and then I wish everyone of course have fun with OTA. OTA this season's pretty interesting with only 1 character. Only 1 character coming, only 1 new Moonlight 5, or 2 Moonlight 5 actually, but one gotcha Moonlight 5 coming out this season. So there hasn't been a major shake up of the meta ever since other than Fearin or Scales coming out. It's pretty funny. So otherwise, I wish everybody the best of luck, and I'll see you guys later. Bye bye.